What if one of the most wholesome shows in television history wasn't as peaceful as it looked? What if the smiling faces, gentle life lessons, and white picket fences were hiding decades of tension, resentment, and unresolved conflict? For millions of Americans, the Andy Griffith Show represents comfort, a reminder of slower days, shared dinners, and common decency. It's the sound of a whistling theme song drifting through an open window. It's black and white television glowing in a living room where the world felt safer, simpler, and kinder. But behind the scenes of Mayberry, the reality was far more complicated. And at the center of that hidden story were three people: Andy Griffith, Frances Bavier, and a young red-haired boy named Ron Howard. So let's ask an uncomfortable question, one we rarely ask about the people who shaped our childhoods. How much do we really know about the people we grew up trusting on television? When the Andy Griffith Show premiered in 1960, it didn't just succeed, it anchored itself into American culture. 8 seasons. Nearly 250 episodes. Ratings that never dipped below 7th place. In an era of fierce competition, that kind of consistency was unheard of. Mayberry offered something America desperately wanted, a world untouched by chaos. No shouting matches. No bitter divisions. Problems were solved with patience, empathy, and quiet wisdom. Sheriff Andy Taylor didn't raise his voice, he raised people up. But even as audiences fell in love with Mayberry, cracks were quietly forming behind the camera. Andy Griffith, warm and sociable off-screen, clashed deeply with Frances Bavier, the woman America adored as Aunt B. On television, they were family. In real life, they were anything but. Why does that matter? Because this wasn't a brief disagreement or a personality clash that faded with time. It was a quiet feud that stretched across decades. Bavier was intensely private, exacting, and deeply serious about her craft. Acting wasn't just a job to her, it was a calling, and she demanded respect for it. Directors often described working around her carefully, unsure which request might spark resistance. She could be rigid, guarded, and unyielding. Griffith, on the other hand, thrived on camaraderie. He valued laughter on set, ease between scenes, and emotional warmth. He saw the show as a family, imperfect, but united. Their personalities collided. Neither truly backed down. And slowly, silently, the distance grew. Ron Howard, just a child at the time, felt it too. Imagine being a boy on the most beloved television set in America, and sensing tension you don't fully understand. Imagine loving your job, but feeling uneasy whenever certain scenes came up. Howard later acknowledged that while Andy Griffith treated him with kindness and patience, like a mentor and protector, Frances Bavier remained distant. Not cruel. Not loud. Just cold. No warmth. No connection. And for a child, that kind of emotional wall can linger longer than anyone realizes. Have you ever worked somewhere that looked perfect from the outside, admired, praised, even envied, but felt tense the moment you stepped inside? Years passed. The show ended. Lives moved on. But the silence between Griffith and Bavier remained. Eventually, Griffith tried to make peace. He showed up unannounced at Bavier's home, hoping to clear the air, to talk, maybe even to heal something long broken. Instead, it made things worse. Bavier valued her privacy fiercely. To her, the visit felt like an intrusion, not an olive branch. The divide deepened. Sometimes even good intentions arrive too late, or in the wrong way. And yet, life has a way of softening even the hardest edges. Near the end of her life, battling serious illness and facing her own mortality, Frances Bavier made a choice. She called Andy Griffith. She apologized. She admitted fault. She acknowledged his leadership, his patience, and the success of the show they built together. Griffith accepted. No public announcement. No dramatic reconciliation. Just two aging voices, years of pride laid down, and forgiveness quietly offered. Isn't it strange how forgiveness so often arrives when time is almost gone? For Ron Howard, Mayberry was only the beginning. He grew up in front of America's eyes, a rare, fragile thing. Many child stars burn out, disappear, or lose themselves along the way. Howard didn't. He paid attention. He watched adults, their kindness, their flaws, their conflicts. He learned not just how stories were told, but how people behaved when the cameras stopped rolling. Happy Days brought him another wave of fame. But his real ambition lived behind the camera. He walked away from the spotlight not out of bitterness, but clarity. He chose storytelling over stardom, craft over applause, purpose over nostalgia. Years later, Ron Howard would become one of the most respected directors in Hollywood. Trusted, collaborative, steady. In many ways, he embodied the opposite of chaos, a rare constant in an industry built on instability and unpredictability. Perhaps Mayberry, the idyllic, sun-soaked town where he spent his early years on screen, never fully existed. The white picket fences, the porch swings, the neighborly smiles. Maybe they were a fantasy. But something from that world stayed with him. A sense of order, of kindness, of the quiet dignity in everyday life. And maybe that's the real lesson. The people we admire are human. The worlds that comfort us are often carefully constructed illusions. But even within imperfect systems, something meaningful can survive. Small acts of kindness, the resilience of spirit, moments of forgiveness. It isn't about perfection, it's about what you carry forward. Mayberry wasn't real. But the lessons still are. By the time Ron Howard directed Splash, Apollo 13, and A Beautiful Mind, he had fully reinvented himself. The child actor who once played Opie had become a director whose name commanded respect across the industry. His Oscar win for A Beautiful Mind cemented his place in Hollywood history, but it also stirred controversy. The film was praised for its emotional depth but criticized for softening the harsh realities of John Nash's life. Howard admitted he had made a conscious choice, emotional clarity over strict accuracy. Some applauded that decision, arguing that the story's heart mattered more than every factual detail. Others condemned him for glossing over truth in favor of sentiment. And therein lies the eternal question. When telling someone's story, where do you draw the line between truth and meaning? Where does responsibility to reality end, and the responsibility to humanity begin? Howard wrestled with that question then, and he would wrestle with it again. Years later, it resurfaced with Hillbilly Elegy. Howard approached the project as a human story, not a political one. At the time, J.D. Vance wasn't a public figure. He was just a young man with a story. But as Vance's rhetoric shifted and his political profile rose, Howard made something rare for him, a public break. No shouting. No insults. Just disappointment. For a man known as Hollywood's calmest presence, that quiet decision spoke volumes. Perhaps it touched an old nerve, the same one formed decades earlier on a set that looked gentle but often felt rigid beneath its cheerful exterior. Howard had learned early what it's like to trust a surface only to discover something colder underneath. How many times in life do we mistake presentation for character, comfort for truth, smiles for sincerity? And yet, despite the disappointments and the complexities of human nature, Howard's personal life tells a very different story from the tabloid chaos that so often swirls around Hollywood stars. Ron and Cheryl Howard met as teenagers. No scandals. No sensational headlines. Just two people growing together, navigating life side by side. Their marriage has lasted more than 5 decades, a rarity in any industry, let alone the cutthroat world of entertainment. Their secret wasn't perfection. It was persistence. They learned to bend without breaking, to listen without judgment, to forgive and move forward together. They evolved, sometimes slowly, sometimes with effort, but always together. And when life's difficulties came, as they inevitably do, they stayed. In an age obsessed with reinvention and the fleeting thrill of novelty, that kind of steadiness feels almost radical. It reminds us that real achievement isn't always about accolades or recognition. Sometimes it's about showing up, day after day, and nurturing what matters most. Ron Howard's life, both on and off the screen, reminds us of something vital. Appearances deceive. Nostalgia simplifies. And even the gentlest, sunniest stories carry shadows. Mayberry wasn't perfect. Hollywood isn't perfect. People aren't perfect. But growth, forgiveness, and clarity, those are real. So the next time you revisit an old show, a classic film, or even a cherished memory from your own life, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what was happening behind the smiles? What small acts of courage, kindness, or forgiveness went unnoticed? What lessons linger quietly, ready to shape who you are today? Ron Howard's journey shows us that it's not the perfection of the story that matters, but the truth of the experience. It's in the patience to grow, the grace to forgive, the courage to step away when needed, and the quiet commitment to remain steadfast when the world expects you to falter. And one last question. Which Ron Howard film has stayed with you the longest, and why? Think about it. The answer might reveal more about you than you realize, the way his stories reveal the hidden truths behind the facades we all carry. Because in the end, it's not about the illusions we chase. It's about the real moments we live, the lessons we take, and the people we choose to become.